Same time you were, and so we had both of you going, and we couldn't hear either.
That was odd.
I think she must be speaking in the panel chat or something, like the comms, because I did not hear Liberty.
I believe that you are probably the one starting the show today, but we'll let Alex confirm that.
Yeah, those are comms. That's bleed through.
Thank you. You give me a wee thumbs up.
Yeah, somebody's got comms in the actual show.
Thank you very much.
Or maybe we're just hearing. I mean, I'm hearing them that way.
Richard, panel, please.
I can confirm we are getting audio bleed into the panel audio.
I took care of it.
Yep, it's been fixed.
That is a feature that should probably not be revisited.
Comms in a program feed? No.
I did hear it happen on Channel 4 the other night.
Famously, Apple had this problem. Remember that Apple event? That was a good one. It wasn't comms, but it was it Chinese language was just going into English for some reason.
Jason, did you mean Electron, not Atem, right?
Thank you. Yes, Electron.
Directed an award show about 25, 30 years ago in Southern California, and the truck company had something wired such that the comms wasn't fully present, but it was a little under, it was really far under everything in program. And it all got recorded that way. Nobody caught it.
Did it rhyme with the Schmemmies?
No. It was a minor, it was the Software Publishers Association awards, best browser, best blank, best whatever, best game.
So there were comms going into the program?
Yeah, and it's not really something that a director can double check, because I'm listening to everything.
With the in and out, do we have it? I didn't get all the.
We did have.
No, we're good.
For some reason, it was
It may have been bleed from my headphones. I was just talking to Mickey about it. I think we have it solved.
Okay.
I had turned them way up because we were having those audio problems earlier.
Yeah, that's also another problem with the TLM 102s and 3s. Your ears too close.
Good morning, Alex. Just double checking on starting the show.
Do you want to start the show, or do you want me to start the show?
I can do it, but does that mean I'm saying what's happening every day?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me pull my notes up.
Well, you only got. I can do it. Let me do it here, and we'll have you do it next week.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. In fact, today we'll spend a little more time talking about media and virtual production. We'll be talking about event structure, what's working, what's not working, what we're seeing. A lot of us are doing some stuff in person. We're doing hybrids. We're doing digital. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's working and not working there. And tomorrow, my good friend Frederick Van Johnson will be here, and he's going to talk about the GH6. So a lot of people had requested to have a little bit more time on that, and Frederick's going to be here tomorrow to talk about it and answer your questions. Wednesday, we've been dealing with our SuperSource, and I thought we could just we'll spend the day talking about SuperSource backgrounds and looking at what people do with them and how they work. Not the SuperSources themselves, but just the backgrounds. So we'll take a look at those on Wednesday. Thursday, Jeffrey and Andrew are back talking about their movie. So we're going to talk about previs and some LiDAR and some other things that they were using, and some more of how they planned the show, their movie that's going to be shot a little bit later this week. The first episode 2 weeks ago was amazing. So so it should be a great session on Thursday. And then Friday we have AI Media. They manage captions. They bought AEG and so they do captions in hardware, captions in software, with all, with AI, with people, with respeaking. So they'll be able to kind of answer your questions about how all of that works. And a reminder that not only do we have education on Saturday, but we'll have part 2 of our MakerBit little sessions. The session went 3 hours on Saturday, and it was great. So much fun. We built our boxes. Yeah. So there was a lot of wiring. It did feel, yeah, it was a pretty cool thing. So Roger Wagner will be back with us on Saturday. So stay tuned for that. And then on Sunday, of course, is our more philosophical discussion, and a quick announcement that Todd Reynolds, the live experience, will be happening at noon Pacific Standard Time. We put the link we put the announcement in there, and we'll give you more information. But Todd's going to be back doing some live streams. There's an opportunity to work behind the scenes as well as just watch it. So it should be good. That's going to be noon on Saturday. All right, I'm going to hand it off to the host for today, Liberty White.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are in the world. And if you are on YouTube, we invite you to head over to officehours.global. That way you can join our community on Mukana and ask your questions. And you know what? This is a great time if you have a question to pop it in right now, and we'll get this party started. All right, over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Liberty. Our first question this morning comes from Douglas Carmichael. Morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. Would there be any way, Douglas asks, to add hardware control surface support to Office Hours 2.0?
Alex.
Usually, I think we call that the StreamDeck. So that's the hardware control that I think a lot of people are using for their to help interact with a lot of the pieces that we're using.
All right, next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia is up next. He says, how do I make stingers for my House of Worship Zoom to YouTube broadcast with no budget? Would lower thirds work the same way?
That sounds like a great lab. David.
So if you're bringing all the participants into one Zoom screen, then you can certainly use stingers created in Keynote or anything else. The only other thing I would add is I would encourage you to hesitate about too many stingers. I've been really thinking a lot about just good, clean content and how powerful that can be.
Good point. Noah?
Yeah, I see 2 ways of doing that as well. Hardware or software, right? Hardware wise, you have an Atem or whatever, and you use it as a transition in your hardware. And to get those, you can look for templates online. There are several. And I think you're using OBS, Tony, if I remember correctly. So if you're using that, there are templates you can find as well, purchase or free, for OBS that have transitions, stingers, what have you as well.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, and a stinger is not a lower third, just so you know. It's a stinger goes from A to B, and so it usually wipes the screen from A to B in some way direction or something like that. OBS is what I was going to suggest as the free option. And of course, there are some other ways, but it'll get kind of technical if you want to try them.
Alex?
In the olden days, I used to do these all in Keynote. So I would basically Keynote can output if you save them out, it can output them out as a the hard part is converting that file back to TGA files. So that's the challenge right now, to play them out of the switcher if you want to use them there. But you can export them out as a you can do those, and if you use a Luma key with Keynote, you can actually build it into the system. So it's and I used to do lower thirds that way as well.
And Jason?
And for those with a little bit of budget, if you have a hyperdeck, you can be wonderfully creative with an alpha channel out, and you can program just about anything you can imagine to happen automatically as a stinger with remotes.
Next question. You're on mute.
Can't hear you, Bill.
You're on mute.
Can't hear you, Bill.
Yeah, somehow I must have gotten muted.
Yeah, you get muted if you leave a mic open. You got to close your mic. So anyway, go ahead.
Andre Dale in Berlin says, which is the most cost-effective way to remote control a Mac with a PC and vice versa, and which to control a Mac with a Mac?
Jason.
I'll leave the cross-platform ones to somebody else. PC to PC, you've been able since Windows 7 to automatically do remote support if you enable it on the host computer beforehand. Mac to Mac, the remote system control is a wonderful application. I think it still costs $50, requires a little bit of networking knowledge, but is an incredibly powerful tool for remoting from Mac to Mac.
Grant?
Yeah, so screen sharing is built into Mac and is just a VNC protocol. So you can without remote desktop that Jason was referencing, that is a better piece of software that does more than just screen share. But just with Mac software default, you can turn on screen sharing, and then if you do a bit of port forwarding, if you want to do it from outside of your network, then you can make that work. If you want to go from Mac to PC, you can use something like Tight VNC as a little server that you can install on a PC, and then you can use the Mac screen share into a PC. But if you want to go really easy and bypass all of that and free, the remote desktop Chrome system like Google, so remotedesktop.google is a brilliant service that's free. It works great, and it's totally cross-platform.
Noah?
Chrome Remote Desktop is my go-to, absolutely.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I use VNC for my cross stuff. There's also, since we're talking about it, iPad, you can also get a program called Duet and be able to remote from the iPad. I saw a very interesting video over the weekend from Scott Yan, who actually turned a Mac Mini into a laptop with a Mac Mini, or I'm sorry, a iPad Mini.
Can you drop that link in the chat? That sounds very interesting. Next question.
Absolutely.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. He says, I have a rolling cart, a Revision 6 Fenwick, based on a Milwaukee PACKOUT system. What solutions have you used to pretty up equipment that can be visible from front of house?
Bill?
I would say take a note from how all banquet halls all around the world do it. They have little clip-on drapes that you pull up a regular 4x6 table, but you clip a nice little skirt around it. You can do something like that and just adapt it to whatever the edge of your table looks like, and they pack up real small, and it can make a draped wire system that is pretty unsightly look pretty clean very quickly.
Grant?
Yeah, we call them an ops surround, like an operation point surround, and often it's a drape, like pipe and drape, and it's makes it nice and neat. And the tip on those, not that I do many in-person events now, thankfully, but when we did, the trick on that was to put that up almost first, and then when the client walks in, they don't see a bunch of cables everywhere and all the gear. They see a nice, neat surround, a nice, and often. Most people do that last. If you do that first, it makes a really great impression for the client.
Chris?
Somewhere I have some photos from a show that I did prior to the pandemic. And the producers of that show did something really interesting. In the back of the room, they built a riser that was about 6 feet tall, as I recall, maybe 4 or 5 feet tall. And it was wrapped in black like netting, okay? And so, and the riser was square. It was almost like, it was just this cube of black. And then everybody on the crew sat up on this riser with their back to the outside of the cube. So as you walked in, you saw the glow of monitors, and it was kind of mysterious. You couldn't really see what they were doing, but it was like a technology exhibit. It was really interesting, and it was kind of a tech thing anyway, so people didn't mind it. But the front of house mixer was looking forward, and then all the video playback and stuff, they all had their back out, and you could walk 360 degrees around this cube. And it was super interesting. I have some pictures I'll show them sometime. Very cool show.
I was like, did you take pictures? Did. Alex?
Yeah, so this is, let's see if I can pull this in. So this is one of the things we've kind of moved towards in a lot of these places where we would get someone to bring something that's a little bit more structured. Let's see here. There you can see the mess on one side and the black on the other. As people walked in, they didn't really see it. This is for a fairly fast load in that we needed to do. There's Sam, by the way, if you can see him down in the lower corner. There's Sam before he was working at other places. Anyway, so but that nice smooth one, we definitely did a lot with pipe and draping and so on and so forth, but creating a nice smooth piece we found looked nice with a little bit of structure, and it was easy to find anywhere in the world. That's Berlin.
Nice. Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California, U.S. says, for Blackmagic, there seems to be 3 flavors of video optical fiber modules, 3G, 6G, and 12G. Could a 10G network SFP be used with the Blackmagic Mini optical converter fiber 12G?
John?
No, they cannot. It's 2 different protocols that are being used. One is IP-based. The other is the SMTPE protocol for video transmission. So they're just not going to be compatible, unfortunately.
Okay, next question.
Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia says, given that the iOS Photos app is somewhat lacking in organization and tagging, at least tagging photos for searching, what mechanism do you use to tag, organize, and search for photos?
Jason?
A bit of a purist on this one. I've been shooting for so long that if it's not in Lightroom, to me, it's kind of not a picture. For the longest time, I used my iPhone as, kind of as my portable sketch pad. And, it wasn't what I was going to do when I was going to be photographic. Since then, photos, I think, has become much more significant. And in the background, the AI-based, animal detection and street detection and location. And, very quickly, the summation of the metadata has begun to eclipse whatever it is that I'm using to organizationally organize my own stuff.
Grant?
Yeah, I totally agree with Jason. I am totally sold on photos. I've got 60,000 some photos there, and the GPS data alone is often what I use. I just search for a location and bang, I find what I want. But even recently, I had something where I knew that it was near a tree. I just wrote in tree. Sure enough, here came all my photos with a tree in it, and I got it. But here's my extra tip. Just recently, I think in the last couple of updates, they added optical character recognition in photos. And it's really cool. So here's a shout out to Predo. On your Facebook profile, you've got a bunch of binary, and I was like, oh, what is this? You've got. Do you know what I'm talking about, Predo?
Of course.
Yeah, so you've got a bunch of binary that's written there, and you can't copy it. Like, at least on the phone, you can't just copy it. I was going to put it into Google and do a translate. Couldn't do that. So what I did is just a quick screenshot straight into Photos, went to Photos, and I could copy the text, took it out, and I won't wreck it, but essentially a hello world is essentially what it was about, right?
Nice hack. Cool. Very cool hack. Alex?
Yeah, and I have to say, photos for most of my stuff. I think that I still have kind of a collection of my stuff I've shot with SLR that is kind of a weird mixture of Lightroom and aperture, which I can still open because I haven't been able to totally get everything out of it the way I want it. But I use 99% of the time. I've got 100,000 photos, and I shoot them mostly with my phone and I have to admit that I resist shooting with a bigger camera because I won't have GPS data because that's how I find all the photos. And then I have a lot of albums. So if I have certain things I want to collect, I put them into little albums all the time.
Chris?
I concur. Same thing. In the same way, Grant, that you can search for like bridge. I did an experiment. I searched for dog, okay? And not only does it find a photo of a dog, but it found a video that was in my phone that for the first 5 or 10 seconds was just the backyard, and then a dog ran through it. So it's deep searching into not even just the first frame of a video, but what is happening in the video. It's totally amazing. The places... Also, I love Apple Photos.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz is up next from St. Paul, Minnesota, and he says, are there any known issues with the Windows 11 upgrade with AV software or hardware?
Grant?
I've had problems with Dante virtual sound card on Windows 11. Yeah, surprising. But yeah, so I probably will roll back at some point, but I was just playing around with it.
There you have it. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas says, has anyone ever set up a WLM or WLM meters, I guess, on a Windows 10 or 11 machine? And if so, how did you do it?
John?
Paul, the Waves plugin is a paid-for product. Ulean is free. I found Ulean takes more CPU resources than regular WLM. You purchase WLM, and then I use either OBS or Hijack to launch the plugin.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is up next with this one. Has anyone used CloudHQ to copy and move data between multiple clouds like AWS, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, and so forth?
And I raised my hand on that. I haven't used that to move anything across, but okay, we have people coming in now. Jason, I'll defer to you.
Well, I haven't either, but I would just say in general, the very best way to do this, yes, there are paid services that will synchronize between the two. If you find yourself doing this somewhat regularly and have not a whole bunch of bandwidth constraint, get a NAS. Synology NASs will do this very well, and they will truly, if you want to sync Dropbox with Google Drive, absolutely, no problem all day.
Grant?
Yeah, I think I did use CloudHQ at one point, and there was a bandwidth restriction on it. And so I think it was actually grabbing the files from one and then uploading it to another. Whereas I would encourage you to have a look at something like Zapier, which can tie a whole bunch of things together. And what I believe Zapier is doing is more from that API point of view. It's telling the other one to grab it from there itself. And so then it's not actually doing any bandwidth usage, and there's no data usage in that. It's just a bunch of API calls. So yeah, Zapier.
Yeah, just communicating between software programs. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He says, what job title would you want if you did the following? If you, for a house of worship specifically, operated a TriCaster and a production room, managed graphics, playback, some audio A2 work, and simpler tech video setups across the campus?
Noah?
I could think of a couple. The main one would be tech director, technical director, something like that, TD. Producer gives you kind of like an overarching theme. And then if you have a lot of people on a team and you're rotating people out, utility, right? Somebody who can do a little bit of everything.
Alex?
Innocent bystander. that's my favorite title for most things. But if you actually want a title, I think I'd probably call it a technical producer. Would be probably what I would lean towards.
David?
Well, because I know that he works in a Jewish community, I would offer a Torah techi.
And Bill?
Just to give another option, you could also say technical coordinator. It's a little less specific, so any of those probably work.
Good call. Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis says, it's been a minute since the NFT conversation. Did anyone get more involved in that space since?
Alex?
Liberty and I worked on front and back on an NFT discussion. How did that discussion go, Liberty?
It was really good. There were a number of some kids who actually built out their entire an NFT and they're selling it. So I was like, if these guys can do it, so can I. They were really impressive. So yeah, it was a great conversation and just seeing where, the next generation is going with that.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, how it progresses. With a lot of things that I work on, we just play with a lot of things and just see how they turn out rather than trying to make a decision about where they're going to go.
Yeah. And I actually have a call after a meeting after this to just get started with our own NFT. So I'll probably have some stuff to report back to because we're looking at building out some stuff for Chosen Media Kids and getting kids involved in NFTs. John?
If Chris Fenwick can do it, anybody can do it. OpenSea.io is the largest marketplace for NFTs. You drag and drop one of many different formats up to their site. The hardest thing is creating a wallet, and they do charge a service fee for your listing and sales. But there's still blockchain fees associated. So until we get that figured out, it's still anything less than $100. It's really not worth it to list still.
Yeah, and just a timeline, as you said, to get started, get your wallet, and get that up. But it's moving along. So great question. Next question.
Chris Taylor, Carlsbad, California is up next. Says, occasionally when getting ready to do a Zoom event, I find that my Blackmagic design camera from the Atem is not a camera choice in Zoom, and I have to restart my computer. Any fixes or ideas?
Jeffrey.
Most likely another program is taking over the camera and not letting go. Microsoft Teams was known to do that at the beginning, and of course it really depends on if you're on a PC or a Mac. But I would check to see what other programs you're running and cancel them. Go back into Zoom and see if the Atem shows back up.
Mateo.
Another thing that I noticed is the USB cable that connects the Atem Mini to the computer. You need to have a very good quality one to have a stable connection. I can post later on the chat some cables that work for me. There's a PureLink cable that is working very well since I changed cable that is very stable now.
Grant.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. A short USB-C cable and going directly into the computer, not through a hub or anything like that, will help. And then a restart, often if you've got your if the USB-C is plugged in, that's often giving a little bit of power as well. So when you do a power cycle, you need to unplug the USB-C as well as the power. And the last thing I'd say to Chris Taylor is there's a great Australian bakery in Carlsbad that I got a really good Australian pasty from at one point. So I just thought I'd offer that. It's Carlsbad.
Now I'm hungry. And I'll just add that I think I mentioned this maybe last week that I was having issues with my Blackmagic, and it was more like the power cord. So I'd actually challenge you to even test that to see if everything's going okay with the power cord. And Bill?
I'm requiring Grant to put that in the chat because I'm right down the street from Cardiff, and we go there regularly because there's a tri-tip that is sold there that is widely known as Cardiff Crack. And if I can add a bakery stop to that run, my life will improve.
There it is. You can get everything on office hours. Next question.
Next question comes from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Are there some great camera images on the? There are some great camera images on the panel. Can everyone quickly share what cameras they're using today?
Jason.
Yeah, this is a Blackmagic 6K Pro with a Canon 24-70 2.8.
And John?
This is a Blackmagic 4K with an Olympus lens.
And Noah?
I do want to quickly emphasize it's multiple ingredients that make up the great images that you see. I'm using an FS5 with a 35mm prime.
Tony?
I'm using a 10S Max iPhone, Filmic Pro, GVM, 3-panel lights.
Grant?
There's a Canon M50 with a 22 millimeter lens.
Alex?
Blackmagic 6K with a 24-70 2.8.
Bill?
Blackmagic 6K with a Canon 1635 L-glass lens.
And I'm using a Blackmagic 4K, and I've got a Lumix 2.8 lens. And Jeffrey?
I'm actually using a PTZ Optics 20X camera, so I can do things like this and come back into frame.
Fancy. Nigel?
Yeah, another Blackmagic 6K with a 50mm lens on it.
And David?
I'm the lone Sony. I'm on a Sony a6400 with a Sigma 16 1.4 lens.
It just goes to show any camera can work if you work it. Next question.
Graham Cardwell, Belfast, Northern Ireland, up next. In our church, we have a Christie DHD600-G projector that's coming to the end of its natural life. We've ruled out a video wall. What laser projectors should we consider as an upgrade? Probably looking at something around 10,000 lumens or so. Is that enough?
John?
10,000 lumens, if you're in a dark space, will be plenty. If you're in a room with lots of natural light, you may be struggling to get some visibility there. I would take a look at the Sony laser projectors. I've had a lot of good luck with them. The Epsons, they last a pretty long time, but they tend to shift towards green a bit. And then I would also just recommend get it with a local integrator. They're really going to understand. That's going to be typically who you're going to for first level support. It's going to be really critical to have a good relationship there.
Nigel.
Yeah, I was just going to back up what John said. Be careful buying one of these, installing them yourselves. Go to someone who knows. Sonys are on very short supply. We really like the JVCs, but I don't think they do one up to 10,000 lumens. But get someone who knows what they're doing to set it up for you, because they look a lot harder. They look a lot easier than they are to get right.
Alex?
Yeah, most of what we use are Christie's and Barcos, but for sound, oftentimes if you're going to put that projector somewhere, that's going to be exposed to the audience. Panasonics tend to be a little bit quieter than the Christie's and the Barcos.
Noah.
I just wanted to share a quick side note story. I did install a video wall over the last couple of days without doing that before, and it took us 2 days to figure out the process and how to build it and deconstruct it and build it again four different times. So yes, go with an integrator if you can.
Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis has this. As a synagogue, we have internally trained staff to manage production needs during the year, but we have a peak season around the high holy days. How would you go about hiring either a technical director or a solid audio video tech for that month?
John.
I think this is another use case where like having a great relationship with your integrator is going to pay off. Lots of times the people that work for those integration companies also will do side gigs. And so you could reach out to them, people who are familiar with your system, who you could bring in randomly throughout the year to make sure they're up to speed. And then they can make sure those events go really smooth. For those, high holy days, it's going to be very critical for everything to run really well. You don't want someone stepping in who's not very familiar with you or your staff. There's going to be some friction there that you just don't want to experience through those times.
Yeah, get them in early. David?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. I actually think it's a big mistake to put all of our eggs in the high holiday basket. I'm very familiar with the high holidays. I've led them for many years. And I think that from a Jew, without getting too religious here, I think a religious perspective is that every day is sacred. Every day should matter, and our productions, the production level should be consistent. And so for me, my interest is not in having a fantastic, amazing production just when the most people show up. It's in having a consistently fantastic production that I know how to manage, or that someone on my team knows how to manage, and that we can put out so that I don't have to wait until September to invite people to appreciate all of the hard work that I've put into it. It's happening every single day, every single week.
Good point. Grant.
Yeah, great point. I think that what's interesting, and there's always a hard balance with going from a volunteer-based system to a semi-paid, where you have some paid employees and then you have some volunteers. It's really tricky. But ultimately, I just say, what is the cost of failure? Often it can be the thing that is last thought about is the production, but it's the first thing that people notice when it goes bad. And so I would, where you could possibly save money by trying to employ someone on a casual basis, I would go to a system where you are paying someone to provide the service rather than paying them by the hour. And that way you're actually asking them to provide the service that is everything, and they will determine how long that takes, and they will do all the preparation, and they take the responsibility of that.
Alex.
Yeah, so I mean, as someone who learned AV at my local church, that's how I learned how to do it. Many of the things when I first started when I was 10, to run the audio. The thing that most house of worships that we've worked with do really effectively is they have a core staff that they keep on all the time, and then they have a pretty large volunteer staff that's usually teenagers and young adults who are interested in learning this stuff. What makes it work actually is being particular. So the mistake that some churches make is they're very relaxed. They're very like, well, everybody's volunteering, so we'll be, we won't. But the thing is people don't like being mediocre. They like being great. They like being great at things. And when we teach them how to do things really well, that's what I was brought in to do for a couple of houses of worship, different denominations, is when we teach them how to do it great and we're particular and we push and we pull and we go, oh, there's a little bit of something in that mic, and we're going, then people are getting good at something and they come back. They come back and they want to volunteer because now it gives them somewhere to go. And there's a whole, you'll find that there's a whole, in most congregations, there's a whole group of people that don't want to, they want to go to church, but they don't want to sit through the church. So that's your tech team, so anyway, so that they're doing their part. But they don't want to. They get too antsy sitting down there, and so they. So anyway, what we do is, what we've done in the past with these things, and I've just come in to help train people, because they've gotten to a point where they want to level up again, and the thing that has worked is they have this huge pool of people. Not everybody's working all the time. They come in, everybody's got one Sunday or Saturday or Friday, depending on what they're doing, a month or two. But now you have this huge staff that knows your system, that follows the same beliefs, that is all part of a community. And when you need to ramp up, so when they have their more specific one, suddenly everybody just shows up. And they produce this bigger event, but it is the most consistent way I've seen for houses of worship and organizations to do it, is to build this large staff. Now, the way to engage them again is the person who you bring on staff has to be particularly pushing at it, and making it better. And you invest in hardware. So the best ones invest in hardware because you're investing in the hardware that they can't get at home. So there, like a lot of places you'll walk in and there's like a CL5, sitting there, and they have to learn how to use a CL5, but because that gets them excited. They're using the big cameras, they're using the big, and it seems like a large investment when you buy it, but it draws volunteers in because they're going to get an opportunity to train on it every week.
That's a really great point. Chris?
There's another downside to hiring people in a church body. I ran a church tech team for 15 years. And you put one person on a paid position. For example, the church that we were at on Sunday, paid audio engineer. I happen to know he gets paid. I could have mixed the heck out of that room. I will never volunteer to do it because I know it's covered by somebody who's paid. You start paying certain key people, and the potential volunteers that could step up, that might really want, I liked what you said, Alex, they want to go to church, they just don't want to be at church. That's a good way of putting it. But I will tell you that type of service is a whole nother type of participating in a church. Churches need that. And so when you pay somebody to do a job, you're not going to find the volunteers. It's a delicate balance for sure.
Alex?
And most of the organizations that are paid, they pay for a manager that's there to organize the team, but they only step in to do technical if people don't show up. But that has always been the part that works, because then people understand why they're getting paid. They're getting paid because during the week they're organizing spreadsheets and they're figuring out who's going to show up and they're figuring out what the graphics are, and they're, but the folks that show up on the day have been successful.
Yeah. And I just even think about, just really good point, is when I volunteered at church and I was on the production team, it's like, ooh, this is equipment we don't have in the studio. So you get a chance to play with it. So excellent point. And for those of you who are watching, we could use some more of your questions. So no question is too small or too great. Go ahead and pop that into Makana. Next question.
Next one comes from Matt Cool in Montreal, Canada. And he says, I've been asked to geo-block certain countries from all upcoming webcasts on Vimeo and Zoom. How effective are the geo-blocking tools in these platforms, and can a simple VPN get around it?
Jason?
I'm going to pull a Mickey and say it depends. If you check the box, it'll do most things pretty well for most people most of the time. But yeah, a skilled VPN can pretty much get out of any sort of IP-based geolocation block pretty much all the time. There are definitely ways around it, and there are definitely ways to fix those ways around it. It's like, the radar companies and the radar detectors. Similar idea.
Grant?
Yeah, this is a really interesting thing in that this actually fits into the second hour discussion today about events, because I often think about, well, what is the in-person analog to what you're trying to do? Like when you had a in-person event and it was open to the public and people could literally walk in off the street, what's the equivalent of what you're trying to do with geo-blocking? Are you asking people where they're coming from? You like, what is it about the security of what you're doing that you're really trying to protect? And also, with all security, it's a trade-off of convenience, right? So, as Jason said, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things you could put in place to stop, trying to do VPN access and things like that, and you would make it really difficult for people who are in your country that you want to be able to access it. It makes it even harder for them. But just to be clear, Vimeo has geo-blocking. You can easily do it, and Zoom does as well. So in Zoom, you can say which countries you either want to allow or which ones you want to block. And then if you're worried about the VPN access getting around it, I mean, you're getting into a subgroup of people that know how to get a VPN to work well enough for it to run high bandwidth, either the Zoom or Vimeo. Chances are they're going to have a bad experience either way.
Alex?
Yeah, most of this is political, or you're dealing with the legal ramifications of something, and you don't really care about the VPN. like people VPN around it when you're geo-blocking. It's because Germany doesn't want us to stream to YouTube, or YouTube doesn't want to pay Germany fees, or you don't want to send it to Russia because of the current situation, or you don't want to, but usually the geo-blocking, as a producer of content, someone tells you to geo-block and you go, okay, and you go in and you geo-block it. Does it work for the average person? Absolutely. Does it work for anyone who actually wants to watch it? Not at all. But even the NFL, I used to watch the Steelers. I used to have the NFL ticket, but the NFL ticket in the United States wouldn't get me Steelers. I don't know why, but you could never watch Steelers in the NFL ticket. So I subscribed in Delhi and used a VPN to watch it. So if the NFL can't figure this out, you can't either.
Next question.
Next one comes from Peter Sargent in Fullerton in the U.S. He said, if one is technically proficient at video production, how do you overcome the anxiety of being asked to teach a class? Thanks.
Noah.
I love this question because it's all about mindset and having a good frame of reference, right? So I'll give you a little bit of a mantra. So first, you need to believe that anything that you practice, you can get better at, right? So that's step one. Secondly, you need to accept the first time you do something is going to be the worst that you're going to be at that thing, right? So that also means that you're going to get better at that thing the more you practice, the more you get the reps in, right? And then finally, you need to remember that you're providing somebody value when you give that class. Somebody's going to get something out of that. You're pouring into somebody else. So if you remember those things, I think you'll move forward.
Nigel.
Yeah, great advice. I think that sums up of how you get the confidence. And you get confidence by doing all the things that were just explained. And the one I want to double down on it is both practice. So you can practice this in front of the mirror, in front of friends and family, do the practice. But second of all, take the time to prepare properly. Don't think you're going to busk it when you're doing it. And if you do all the things that you just heard in those, then you will get yourself some confidence. And you've got to have the confidence that you know your material and that you are a professional at what you do. And so when someone tries to ask you a question, rather than be thrown about it, rather than get lost, I always say when you get asked a question in that sort of situation, don't go down, go up. Don't get more detailed, go up a step. And go back to where you feel most comfortable, and you can probably answer it without any problem at all.
Jeffrey.
The Steve Jobs, remember the Steve Jobs story is basically he did everything in front of a mirror, and he did it till perfection, and then he did it 25% more. So always practice, as everybody's been saying. But there's a great place that you can go to test out your ideas and theories on a group, and that is called After Hours. So come out to After Hours and try and set up some things, even office hours, second hours. If these are events that are things that you can replicate and teach us how to do, if it falls in this category. If it doesn't fall into the categories that we really focus on, then you could always find a group somewhere in your city that's looking for this, things like that, things like Rotary clubs and stuff like that you can get in front of people and practice your stuff on.
Bill.
And also remember, they've come because they want something. They want to learn something. you do have that information that they want. So for my money, this is about anxiety. That's the word you're using, and it's important. But there's two kinds of anxieties. There's the anxiety that, oh, I'm going to do a bad job and it's going to look bad for me. That is useless anxiety. It'll just drive you crazy and there's no end to it. There is another kind of anxiety, which is the I want to do a great job for my audience. And so I'm nervous about fulfilling their expectations. That is the best kind of anxiety, because it'll cause you to do what you're doing right now, which is to go out and ask people, what are the little steps I can do to make this better? Keep your focus on your audience. Keep your focus on meeting your audience's needs. If they start asking weird questions, you can use little techniques like, well, let's have a discussion about that. Does anybody else have more idea? You don't have to know every single thing about your topic. What you have to do is constantly be thinking, how can I help them master this information? If you're serving them, you're a great teacher.
That's a great hack. Make it a community response to the question. Chris?
I'm going to go out on a limb here. Here's the thing. You might be more than technically proficient. You might be really good at something, but some people are just horrible teachers. And if you're starting with anxiety, it may not be the thing for you to do. I would argue that I can learn better from a gifted educator who knows less about a topic than somebody who knows everything about a topic that doesn't know how to teach. Education, teaching, it's a gift, and you can get better at it, but you may not be great at it. So, you might want to take another job. I'm just saying.
Jason.
Wow, what to add there? That which I cannot explain, I do not understand. I always come back to this anecdote because it reminds me that you can get better and better at explaining something in a way that is comfortable to you and that your audience will understand better. We are frequently asked the same questions again and again in office hours. In all of our jobs, I'm sure I am no exception. I'm asked the same things all the time. I guarantee my answers are not only more technically useful, but also more comprehensible to more people more of the time than they were when I started a dozen years ago. That's really the reason that your anxiety is coming from, oh gosh, what if I don't understand it? No. Focused on whether or not you can explain it.
And I'll add to all that great advice is Toastmasters. Jeffrey had mentioned like some different organizations that can also help, because it sounds like you've got the technical skill. It's just from the teaching aspect or from like the speaking aspect, and that they teach different techniques that will help you to be comfortable as you're speaking. Also, I taught at General Assembly for a while, and I see that you're in New York. I want to say their head office might be out there, but possibly consider seeing if you can teach and test out your material there. The reason I say that is because they have a very specific way, and I don't know, I'm going to make the assumption you're probably teaching adults, because teaching adults and teaching children are two completely different ways of learning. And they just have a way of explaining how to the different things with either being on group activities and just how adults learn. And I think that those are just some ways that could help you be more comfortable in teaching. And going back to Chris Fenwick's point of like being a really good teacher. Also, I'll just also add is, there's social media as well, possibly taking whatever it is you're teaching, maybe go live on Facebook or like in a small community. That way, as you're like rehearsing, you can either get feedback, or you can also look back like at your tape, like they do in sports, look back at your tape and see, and then just getting comfortable, because it's really, you've got the genius, you're leaning into your genius, which is this technical skill, and just it's building those ideas around how to help you with the presentation aspect of things. And Alex.
The first thing, for when you're self-conscious, you're being present to yourself and how you look, and whether you look good or not good, look good, and what does that mean and everything else. You have to get that out of the way. So to be a good teacher, you have to get yourself and what that means and how you look out of the way, so that you can just be present with what's coming in and be okay with the fact to say, I don't know what the answer to that is, and that's and because it's not about you, it's about serving the folks that are asking those questions and trying to learn. But it's a really hard thing to move yourself out of your own way in doing that. But all your nervousness is caught up in that self. And so that is the thing to kind of keep on reminding yourself that yourself is in the way of yourself. So but that's the thing that you have to get out of the way. I find that teaching kids is the best thing to do to learn how to teach anyone, because it requires you to explain things in concrete terms, because they don't have there's not a lot of shorthand. And so I spent summers teaching 12-year-olds how to do high-end compositing photogrammetry. Is the best thing I ever did, because now I don't have any shorthand. I can describe it in very clear terms to almost anyone.
Next question.
Next one comes from Noah Sargent in Fullerton again. He says, Alex, what's the name of the product for pipe and drape alternatives that you're using?
We usually just ask for black flats. That's usually when we're anywhere in the world, we ask for black flats, and that's what we get. Sometimes they're beat up, and most of the time they get built on site. like literally someone brings a pile of wood and some black fabric, and they nail them together and put them together in like 30 minutes.
Next question.
This comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, how do you think a StreamDeck to the office... how do you link a StreamDeck to the Office Hours 2.0 control panel?
Grant?
I don't know specifically how the setup is done there, and someone else may be able to, but I was just going to mention that, Companion with the StreamDeck, Companion opens it up to a whole world of other things. And one of those is doing keyboard shortcuts. So when you can do a keyboard shortcut on anything, then you can trigger that using the StreamDeck. And so my example for that is for after hours, I've got an iMac that sits in the corner of my office here, and so I just run it all the time. But it was annoying to go over to unmute or to change from active speaker to gallery view. And so I've just got Vicreon is a little program you can run on Mac and PC. And all it does is it just takes a keyboard shortcut from another computer and triggers it on that computer. And that's working perfectly for me. And so when you think of things like that, that's just one example of what Companion can do. When you start thinking you can do SSH, you can do terminal things, you can do HTTP posts, you can do lots of things that could trigger all sorts of things on a button press.
Alex?
Yeah, I think I misread that email, that one earlier, like how are we using it right now? And a lot of us have StreamDecks that we're interacting with. I actually don't know. Right now, I don't think that there's any hardware set up to work with Office Hours 2.0, because it's really designed as a web interface at the moment. But we'll get there.
Next question.
Ted Claudio in Quezon City, Philippines says, I'm a blogger. What's your recommended portable one-man setup to unofficially live stream a small event, such as a press conference, using one camera with a telephoto zoom lens and another camera with wide shots that can be switched on demand and runs on batteries?
Noah?
I like the thought of having two angles, right? That's usually what I would recommend for a base instead of having just a single boring camera. A couple things about your question. I would definitely highly recommend Ethernet, right? So that's going to be a cable that you need so that you have consistent bandwidth for your live stream and test. Secondly, you mentioned batteries. That's something that I try to stay away from, use it kind of secondarily to house power, right? Having something plugged into the wall. People think batteries are convenient. It's actually not more convenient to have battery power over house power. House power is way more convenient. And instead of going through all of the different specifics of the components that you might need for a live stream, I'm going to go ahead and reference a blog article that was written almost 2 years ago now by myself. And so this basically takes you through all the different components in detail of what you should be looking at and using for your live stream. So we'll go ahead and reference that article.
Jeffrey?
So there are two things that I would recommend. Of course, this will actually bring a new camera into play, but Mevo has the Mevo Start, and you can hook up to 3 cameras onto the Mevo Start and use your phone to switch back and forth. They run wireless, and they can also use what's called the NDI protocol, which will allow you to connect it up to something a little bit bigger. There's another device that a lot of people have tried out. This is called the YOLO Box by YOLO Live. They have the YOLO Box and the YOLO Box Pro. This is the regular YOLO Box and the Pro. With the Pro, you can hook up multiple sources, HDMI and USB cameras. You have an SD card for recording. You'll have a SIM tray to do any type of cellular type of recording. It also has an Ethernet jack, so if you do have a place to plug in, you can definitely do that. This will switch between cameras. This will give you graphics, and then it'll record it, and it'll stream out to Facebook and YouTube. The quality on that is okay. It won't be anything high-end if you're looking for something high-end, but keep in mind that this sounds like something that you're bringing to your audience like I normally do with a lot of my shows.
Alex?
If I'm doing it unofficially, I probably just use an iPhone. But if I'm going to do something where I'm allowed to set up and do something that might not be the official stream, but it's another stream that I'm putting out, I would probably still use Blackmagic 4Ks or 6Ks, going HDMI into the Atem Mini Pro because it already can stream. And so that now you have those two going into that switch. You need to get audio from somewhere. So you got to figure out what little mixer you might need to have there to have some control over that. And then you can actually, with that setup, you can get some fairly large battery systems that you might sit. The problem really is getting noise from the system or anything else. So I know some folks that go to these things that literally come in with a car battery, that they've built into their case, or even a UPS. So a UPS slid into a little box can last a long time when you're only drawing cameras and a switcher, and the cameras have their own batteries as well. So I think that would be a pretty slick little kit if you can set that up. One thing to remember is Scarhoy makes a controller for the Atem that goes onto the arm of your camera. It's the arm of your tripod. There's actually one where you can be switching with your thumb while you're doing it. They've just kind of miniaturized that.
And also, just depending on how big this press conference is like getting as close to the speaker as possible. I don't know how official or unofficial it is because you say that you're a blogger, but that could also be helpful from the audio aspect. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, could ZoomOSC be used to link Zoom to voice recognition or similar alternative interfaces so his mom could connect with him with minimum keyboard and mouse use?
Grant?
The answer is yes, in a roundabout way. You would need to do some serious sort of coding to make all that work. And my question would be why? Yes, ZoomOSC is amazing, but that particular application, exactly what you're talking about, is really what Zoom for home is really designed for. And so the different devices like the Amazon Echo Show, the Portal from Facebook, and the and the Google Nest, all can have Zoom run on them. And particularly when you tie your calendar to that, it will pick up those calendar entries, and will literally just be a one click to join that meeting, which is in your calendar. So you could tie a calendar with your mum, and so then you could just send an invite and it would be there straight away. And you can actually use the voice prompt as well. Join my Zoom meeting. It'll look up, it'll know that you have a Zoom meeting in your calendar, and it'll join straight away. If you don't even have the calendar, you can say join my Zoom meeting, and it'll ask for the meeting ID and the passcode if you've got that turned on. And so you can do it all with voice, and you do it on a device that's purpose built.
Next question.
Tony Mobley is up next again from Noonan, Georgia, and he says, the House of Worship ministers that I'm working with are making the transition to adding podiums in their homes, and my recommendation is a standing desk. Do you agree with me?
Jason?
I'm going to split the baby on this one, because apparently you've got somebody who has a very specific idea of what they want to do. Because, you've got a 20-year history of standing behind a podium, and you kind of get your rhythm going there. And, of course, a standing desk is also very useful. If you Google desktop podiums, what you'll find is there are any number of podiums or lecterns that can be custom built that go right on top of a standing desk that will kind of give you the best of both worlds. I think that's the way to go.
John?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's best to use a standing desk. It's going to get a lot much more utility around the house. I also don't like a big podium. It kind of creates a barrier between your speaker and your audience, and you really want to remove that as much as possible when you're doing a virtual event.
Grant?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that they're used to it. These ministers are used to having something there as that barrier, and they're used to speaking from one to many. But what we're doing here and what they are doing increasingly is one-to-one. It happens to be concurrently with a lot of people. And so I would argue that you don't go and stand in front of a podium with someone standing behind a podium and you have a conversation. You get that out of the way. And so anything to do that online is only going to help the communication more.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago says, will there be more keynote labs this summer?
Alex?
Yes. Yeah, we're making way for, we don't want to make it all keynote on Saturday, all keynote every Saturday. So we're kind of breaking it up. So we had John Snyder did a great one on PowerPoint and stuff that you could use if you were doing keynote as well. It's just really a design thing. We're building maker bits right now, and we did that last week and we'll do it next week. And by the way, I would check that out. It was a lot of fun. And then we have the launch on the 19th, but we'll probably come back to keynote shortly after that.
Chris?
Yeah, Kyle, on Wednesday night before the launch in Vegas, John is cleared for me to give a short presentation on 5 killer keynote tips you will not learn anywhere else. But you have to be on the dry lake bed with us having our pre-launch cookout. So, yeah, I would really get to Vegas, Kyle. That's an inside joke between Kyle and I.
That's a great title, though. That's the copy editor is like, that makes me want to come. Next question.
But it won't be broadcast. It's only live on the lake bed. So we'll see you there, Kyle.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama says, how to monitor audio with WLM meters for usual live streams. Is that a separate computer with a line in using Windows OS? And I know Alex has no interest in the voice meter fruit approach.
Grant.
Yeah, I've done this on a Windows PC, and something that's built into the sound sort of the devices section is you can monitor the audio of an input device, and so you can monitor it straight out. So it's actually a loopback that's built into Windows, and so I did exactly. I had a web presenter. Blackmagic web presenter into a machine, and then I was able to monitor that and have the WLM meters viewing that input as well as hearing it. And so that worked great. And the good thing that I liked about that is there was no volume controls in there anywhere. And this is the thing when you introduce sort of line in or analog, you're not really getting a true monitoring of what it is because you can always alter that the volume. So you really want it to be totally digital so that you know what the meters are is accurate. There's no intervention there anyway.
Alex.
And technically a potato is a vegetable, so it's more like voice meter vegetation.
Next question.
Excuse me. Fleety in Bali, Indonesia will save us from this madness. Ideas on how to approach cable labeling without overinvesting and avoiding sticky cables.
Always a great question. Jason.
We are the wrong group to talk about overinvesting like that. That's just, totally not a thing. This is the Brother PTE 550W, and it is a fantastic piece of equipment. It can actually print on a shrink wrap that you can in turn put directly onto a cable. It'll also print cable flags, and the permanent cable labels will not make your cables sticky because they'll never come off.
Jeffrey?
I've done Sharpies on cables, and especially on XLRs right on the can. It's easy to put a special pattern on or anything like that. And then, of course, as a musician, we use this a lot, and that's nail polish for cables. If you're really steady with your hand, get a nice line or something like that, and then you can have a very specific color. So if somebody's grabbing your cable, you say, "That's my cable because you've got pink salmon on there, and that's my color right there."
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama again. Why is geolocation important? Why are we limiting or blocking useful content around the world?
Alex.
We're not doing it. Usually you have a client that has, for some reason, they want to do it. And then we go, sure, nickel. so we're mercenaries, and so we do it. You should never geo-block unless someone tells you to.
Next question.
Really a comment. Peter Hamilton in Medford, New Jersey says, been watching on YouTube since May, June 2020, and I'm here for the first time. Despite all that time, I'm still pretty clueless, but I just want to thank Alex and this community. You folks are amazing, he writes.
Grant?
I was just going to say, hi, Peter. Great to have you here. And we all were clueless at one point. Everyone's allowed to be new at some point, and we always grow. And I think this is a key thing about our community is that we're curious, and so we're always growing from day to day. So welcome. You're one of us.
Yes, welcome, Peter. Next question.
Next one comes again from Peter Hamilton, Medford, New Jersey. I have Zoom and Mukana up in 2 browser windows. Video and audio on Mukana are lagging well behind Zoom. Why might that be?
Jason.
On behalf of the back end, we're still working on stuff, and their work is much harder than ours in the the visible part of this. So we're working on it, and Zoom is going to be a little different.
I'm just going to answer this one really quickly. The reason that Zoom and Mukana, the Zoom in Mukana are different is because in Zoom, you're at 200 millisecond delay, and in Mukana, you're at 20 seconds because it's embedding the YouTube event into it. So that's why there's a latency.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer, I believe, in Würzburg, Germany, is up next with, I have constant difficulty in logging into my own Zoom meeting via email. Log in with ZoomOSC. It just says, connect failed error message. Any ideas?
Grant.
It is tricky. I don't know whether this is specifically about after hours. Was it that, or was it just in general with ZoomOSC? It looks like it's just in general. It is tricky because what we get used to is the deep links that you get out of the browser launching the native Zoom client is different to how you need to do it in ZoomOSC. There is a thing that you could play around with Firefox where you can choose the default Zoom application to launch when you hit a link. And so you could play around with that because you can make ZoomOSC receive that link when you join. So you could try that. Apart from that, making sure that you're logged into a Zoom account, it can be a free account, can often help as well.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine, our last one, says, is there a follow-up to the Tally Maker bit for those who didn't attend?
Alex?
So much fun. Like 3 hours, it was 3 hours long, but we didn't take a break, and we just had a great time, and we put it together, and I think Jason can show his there. We built a tally light out of a pizza box. And so we're going to program it. It's all wired up now, and we're going to program it next week. It should be a little shorter of a session at 10 o'clock in the morning. But Roger Wagner is amazing. Like, it was just really, really fun. It's a great group of people kind of putting it together, and we just it was really good time. So I'm excited about programming it and moving it forward.
Next question.
Jeff Talley, not to be confused, Denver, Colorado is our next questioner. Where can I go to learn about Tony Mobley's camera setup to get started upgrading my own setup?
Tony.
It's very easy. Find an old iPhone or one that's at least 10th generation and connect it to Filmic Pro, to an Atem Mini. That's it. And have good lights.
Thanks, Tony. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. Has anyone used Vimeo Premium for live streaming or events and or webinars?
John?
I use it every week. Their webinar platform is green, to say it friendly. They're working on it. It's not as great as Zoom, but for video quality, it works out pretty well.
I'm going to start using that green. Grant?
I've been using it probably for 5-6 years. I use it all the time. There's one particular platform we have to use for education, which only uses Vimeo, and so that's where we're stuck. It's at the cheaper, like the premium level. It's like that, whatever it is, $60 a month or something like that. It's very good value, extremely good value. But I have found I often get buffering issues. People on the far end get buffering issues. Where I haven't had that is when I've used an enterprise account at $1,000 a month. The big jump and a big commitment, and then you can have a backup stream, and it uses a whole nother server system and everything. So Vimeo itself is very good. The premium can just be a little bit sketchy sometimes.
Noah.
Yeah, I have kind of a split client base. Half of them have their own platform, or they use a standard platform that they have and pay for. And then the other half are like, well, what do you want us to use? So Vimeo Premium is my kind of backbone to that. I haven't done webinars, but I've done several events, and it's been really solid. They also have a software that's kind of like OBS. It's called Studio 6, and I've been very pleased with that software. And I even like it over Wirecast.
Alex?
Yeah, I would say with the studio product, just don't push it further than it. Keep it in the center lane. Like the remote control stuff doesn't really work. Okay, my experience, it's there and then it's gone. So be careful with that. But as far as a streaming platform, as a premium streaming platform, it's pretty great. And also, where you have to have a clear listing and you have to have control over access and those types of things, I think that Vimeo does a pretty good job of that. They also have great OTT products, so you can have them build an app for you on the Apple TV or other things like that. So it's a really interesting product line from that perspective.
Next question.
Brant Kruger in Minneapolis says, our house is wired for sound, currently using Chromecast audio on each amp channel, but those are discontinued and getting flaky. Any recommendations for AirPlay compatible wired home audio?
Jason?
Absolutely. Get an older Apple TV and an HDMI de-embedder and just put it straight into your amp.
All right. Well, there we wrap up the first hour. Thank you all so much for your great questions. And if anyone had a question that got pushed back, you can always bring that through tomorrow. And we're getting into this conversation about virtual events. Alex?
Yeah. So, this keeps coming up as a single question here and there. And so it seemed like it might be worth having a 1 hour discussion about it, because I think this is a fast moving thing. We talk about this a lot because a lot of us work on events. But I think that is, I think it makes sense for us to constantly be kind of refreshing this conversation, because I think it's going to keep changing. So things have now started to free up. And the kind of things that we're seeing right now is that the number of people willing to return back to physical events is about 30% of what used to be there. Like that, it just seems like when people are doing events, we haven't seen anybody go back to full capacity, in the events that were like this before. It just seems like the numbers are, never more than half, and generally about 30% of the return. And it just seems like they found another, they found other ways to do what they're doing. The other thing that we're talking, I talk to a lot of folks that are going to the conferences that are part of the expos, and it really feels like no one wants to be the first one to jump, but everyone's going, this is a waste of time. like they're like this is like, we don't need to do this anymore. And so it's I think we're in this kind of feels like there's this bend. There's a whole lot of water, sitting over top of something, and everything's just kind of falling, and the structure is kind of bending down, and everyone's kind of waiting for it to pop, but no one's seen it pop yet. I don't think, and I just want to make sure, I don't think this means less events or even less work for event. We talked about this yesterday. I think this is actually more work for event organizers than less, because what happens is people they want to get out and they want to learn things. They just don't want to get on a plane. they don't want to take, I think that their lives filled up. There's like a gel of our life, and their lives filled up to a thing that looks like when they're at home working. And that's a different life than suddenly taking 2 or 3 days out of it to go somewhere for a couple hours of something and then go back. And a lot of people have become highly resistant, to that process. And so they want, and they're used to getting some of them online. A lot of the online service events have been pretty bad. And that's, so I think but that's less of the platform failing and the people who did it are failing, because there's also the other thing that we see a lot of is that when people's events go well, everyone, the people who came to be there, the speakers, the organizers are like, this is the future. So when it's done well, it's not that the structure itself, but they're all like, this is the future. This is where we should go. When they go badly, they're like, I can't wait to go back to physical events, and so it really just depends on what they invest in that process.
Yeah, we kind of started this conversation, I guess, yesterday during our Philosophical Sunday conversations, and just listening to some of my friends who are event organizers, and yes, the excitement of going back, but then also, and it's been repeated here a number of times, of like the ROI of like that global reach. And I shared a link Vimeo put out this report or an article with like a plethora of statistics on how the market is thinking. I think it is a great opportunity for all of us to just kind of take a look at it, measure what's actually happening in our own industries. But, you know, a lot of government groups, they're going to do some smaller in-person events, but virtual just opens them up to so much more. They can track so much more. And I think if we keep remembering like the business side and our clients, our customers are actually looking for, that, and really leaning into that would help even in recognizing, okay, this is not going anywhere. And that's the confidence to continue to educate. There was also just to go into this, like just the kinds of events that are working. And as Alex said, people are looking forward to going back to in person. That's when their virtual events don't go over well. What we get a lot of calls on is, okay, we do Zoom, but we want to do some things differently. So these groups have had 2 years of Zoom. What can we add differently? And as much as the metaverse is still growing and people are still trying to understand that, as I think we'll see where the music industry, gaming industry is really leading in that, and just to be prepared for what that could mean for us and for the community overall. Grant?
Yeah, I totally agree. A trend that I have seen is there's all these virtual event platforms that have popped up. And the thing that I've seen is that there's been a real push for event organizers as distinct from production people, but the event planners and organizers as a push to them, for them to do the work, for them to do the switching, and for them to do, it's like, it's all really easy. It's all just in the browser, and you just click this and then you just click this, and a remote presenter comes in, you just click them and it pops up on the screen. It's all so easy. And lots of those kind of, we call them PCOs, professional conference organizers. Lots of those people have fallen into that trap, and they're like, oh yeah, it is just easy. It's just, you click these buttons. Now, for me, I'm like, yeah, so is a sound desk sitting at the back of a room, right? It's just easy. You just put the faders up and down. How hard can it be? Why wouldn't you just do it yourself? In fact, why don't we just put the computers and the sound console at the front of the room, at the lectern, and you just do it all yourself? Because that's the equivalent of what we're saying with lots of these event platforms, where it's like, oh, it's just so easy. You just click some buttons. Inevitably, they go really badly, because they have far less staff than they do in an in-person event. So all of the normal stuff that they're doing, they're not doing. Like the normal organization stuff is not being done, and now they're trying to do all the production stuff as well, and that's all falling apart. And now they've got a communications issue, and all of it just goes terribly wrong. The other trend that I saw is the same, like this metaverse stuff, all these 3D environments that just make me want to vomit. You know, like the idea that you are wanting to go to a virtual convention center, it just blows my mind. Like, we didn't really enjoy convention centers. Why would we want to virtually go there? You know, like, if we're going to do an event, take us to some, island or something. Like, I don't want to go back to a boring convention center. Anyway, the hope, the silver lining in all of this is that we have seen the emergence of things that are doing it really well. And where I see this is when you get the technology out of the way and you are just connecting with people. And so I think breakout rooms are an amazing utility for events, because when you can get away from, oh, there's 1,000 people here, to, hang on, there's 6 people here, and I'm connecting with them, and then I'm connecting to another 6 people, and there's so much more that we can do with that. Like there's some amazing ability that you just cannot do in person. And I think that's where I'm getting really excited about how is this totally different to in-person events when we go to ways of zapping people into a room where they're connected with people that are asking a similar question, or they make the same money, or they, whatever it is, right? They've got similar interests, and then they can snap to another group, which you just cannot do in person. So I'm quite optimistic and excited about digital first events.
Yeah, like helping them pop around to like curated communities that make sense for them. Definitely. Chris.
Concerning the numbers that Alex mentioned earlier, John, I was wondering if you have any sort of Preto, do you have any sort of insider track on what's coming up for NAB this year? Have you heard any inside Vegas stuff?
No, it's been super quiet.
Is that unusual?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what happens.
Nigel?
Yes, I think I approach this more as the client than the deliverer of the technology. And I would tell you that there are two things that sort of precede all of this, is be really clear what you want the objectives of the event to be. So sometimes there's just not enough clarity on why you're doing this and what you expect out of it, what your metrics for success are. And that may help guide you what the right thing to do is. The second thing I notice in this conversation is we don't really segment events. We tend to all talk about digital first, or we use these very global terms, and we may not all be thinking the same things when we see it. So I've no doubt that if you have hundreds or thousands of people, digital first makes sense. If you've got 10, they may or they may not. It really depends on the objective. So I think you have to segment in your mind different types of event. The third one, which I think Grant, I was interested in his conversations about the people saying, well, it's pretty easy to do. If the objectives of your event are very strategically important to you, and your audience is very strategically important to you, I would always encourage you to use a professional and not an enthusiastic amateur. Enthusiastic amateurs are people who generally go through all the wrong answers before they get to the right one. And the professionals tend to get to the right one a lot quicker. So if you've done your strategy and got your objectives right, pick the right people for the right moment.
Jeffrey.
First of all, Grant, back in 2017, we did a live conference from Luna Park in Sydney, Australia. So that would be kind of a fun virtual event right there, getting away from the conference room idea. For me, I get on a plane tomorrow and I'm going to my first hybrid event. It's not one I put on or I participate in as a panelist. It's called Tech Field Day. And they've been doing the hybrid thing because a lot of people live overseas and they need to participate and they need to learn about these companies, enterprise technology companies that are coming in. So they're working on, and I'm very interested to see how their production crew is going to be doing the hybrid event. For me, I've been finding that it's now creating this balance between going to live events, because I want to go to live events. I want to get out to NAB. I want to get out to some of these other places because there's people I get to meet. There's things I get to do that I won't be able to do from this desk right here. So being able to balance that virtual versus production. 1 week I'll probably be here recording some on-road show type thing, and then the next week I might be at a conference or an event doing some video or even participating in some of the events. So I'm trying to find that happy medium so I know that I'm not going to overlap anything by accident.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that I continue to find myself as we go forward to be more and more reticent about using any of the event platforms. And the reason for it is they're like, yeah, it's all easy, but as soon as you want to step off the rail, you're in Never Land. So you're, like we have this thing that's coming up that the client wants to use StreamYard. And so it was like, okay, great. But then we want to they want to do something with the comments that's different than what StreamYard, than how StreamYard works. Oh my gosh, it's going to be half of our production time is going to be spent figuring out how to manage comments, because, and that's the problem, is that was easy when we were not using that product. And so with all of these, they're built to be something very specific. If what you want to do is exactly what that event platform does, then use it. But if you want to do anything creative with your event and that platform doesn't do it, don't do it. Like, don't try to figure out how to wedge that little thing that you want to do. Just know that that's the limitation of using an event platform, is that it either does what you want it to do or it doesn't do what it wants to do, but there's no customization. And that's why I think I keep on coming back to liking to just use Zoom, because there's 1,000 different ways I can build an event, whether it's webinars or meetings or, breakout rooms and process, like all of those things. And so I just like to, because then we can craft that event to be what we want it to be. And it does take more. It's a bespoke solution. It doesn't have to be. I mean, webinar and events can be just turnkey and you can do what it does, but it gives us a lot of flexibility to do what we want to do.
Noah?
Yeah, I think one of the things for me more recently, I guess, is learning through some of the failures that I've had. One of them was around Teams and trying to stream to Teams. I knew that Vimeo was a more stable platform, and even Zoom, and that was my suggestion with the client. However, I didn't stick to those guns. I was like, we'll just make it work. I think we'll be platform agnostic, right? And just make it happen. That didn't go so well, right? Thankfully, we were able to have another event with that client, make it up a different way, and the second event went much smoother, much better. But the point of all that is, like Alex is saying, there are some tools that work really well that become the industry standard, right? And so go with the trusted programs that work. Another thing I wanted to talk about is, like, we've all been challenged through COVID, right? Post-COVID, during this era, to learn new skills, to develop in new ways, right? And so most of us have risen up to that challenge and grown and expanded our skill set and our mindset and all those fun things, right? And going back to Grant's point is, like, a lot of people had to rethink how event structure works and how we put on these online events. And really, like, there's kind of a divide that's happening still. I feel like there's a certain group of people that are just pulling back and wanting to go back to the old method of how events happened, right? And the presentation styles and the PowerPoint styles, and really how events are constructed and made. And then there's a different group of, or a different set of mindset that's around how do we make this better? How do we utilize this tool to its maximum potential, right? And kind of that reframing, that rethinking, I think is super exciting. Another thing I realized in myself is, like, when COVID first happened, I was kind of afraid, and the virtual movement started happening. I was consciously afraid that we were going to be out of work or out of a job, right? That we were going to be transitioned away from the brick and mortar-esque, right, setup of cameras and gears and lighting and all that fun stuff. But to some of the questions I'll ask later is I think it's just a different movement that's happening, and it's going to be there's going to be more work and more things happening with that. And so the reality is, like, we're providing value. We're not just setting up gear, right? Whether that's convenience or time or stress or the process that we have, that's the value that we're giving to our customers.
John?
I think about one thing we get very beneficial from in-person events is time away and dedication to that. And I think that it's a culture shift that we have to make. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles that we face. And even culturally, internally here at my work, we're about to host 5,000 loan officers in a conference here in two months. And, like, we're having them all fly out. We're not doing anything virtual because of that separation that we're looking to create. And I think it's how do you create that same experience? How do I do a better job of understanding and selling and making sure people feel that? We do a lot of local events too, which I think helps in dispersing that. As far as building local relationships is what we've talked about in the past here. But it's one of those things that, we're dealing with a bunch of fun issues with trying to squeeze 5,000 people into a couple of soccer fields. But I think it really comes down to convincing people who have done this for years to do something new, and really making sure that I think nobody really buys in that people engage virtually. And I don't know if that's just because they haven't seen it well done yet. But I even think about this show and what I do every week. I do a sales huddle for about 1,000 people that attend virtually. And it's like, I would rather have more people engaged and participating in that and really seeing the value from that than just watching, 4 people speak for an hour, essentially.
Yeah, I just want to go back to something that Nigel had said earlier about just the audience and catering to who the actual client is. And there's this graphic that's probably popping up on your screen any moment now, where it just shows what participants, what your stakeholders, what they think of what works for virtual, whether that be question and answer. And specifically, I think what makes this chart really work is it shows the viewer, the speaker, like your three different audiences overall, and how they view the different types of ways that you can do virtual. So just going in with that mindset, and that's what makes this conversation and just office hours overall, so that while we do speak production heavy, it's also what does the client, what are they thinking, getting into their minds. And what I've heard from everyone this morning is the amount of education that still needs to happen, like with Noah's events. Like, okay, they put this on the table for us, but there's another way to do it, and that we can provide the value of showing them how to do that better. So thank you all, panelists, and let's jump into the questions. Bill?
Our first one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, in a discussion about remote versus in-person, one comment was, it's harder to develop those personal relationships that can be a boon toward your career. Could an office hours-like space or an office hours-like technique be useful for mitigating that?
John?
Yeah, a lot of times strong relationships are built about positive experiences over a long time. And so I don't know a lot of you guys. I don't know any of you in person, but we've had positive experiences with several people's in after hours, which then I can build those relationships off of. It's things that we can reference together. It's creating a space for that, whether that's a Teams channel that you just have your team join every hour and maybe nobody talks, but if there is somebody who needs something, that's there, whether it's a Zoom call that you just have going for a different community group, you have to be very intentional when it comes to virtual. Nothing is just going to happen. Everyone will just stay in their silos. And so you have to create that opportunity for relationships to be built.
Grant?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that when you think about all the events you've been to in your past, how many friends did you meet there and are still friends now? Chances are that you already had some sort of relationship with them, and it grew because, to John's point, they were away. They were away and they spent all this time at the bar after the show. So the problem with this idea that, but it's better for building relationships is inevitably those in-person events are not designed around building those relationships. They're about pushing a whole bunch of content out. And so you wear people out for 12 hours and then you say, okay, now you can go to the bar and actually talk to people. And what we're finding is that we are creating these opportunities online where people are connecting, and these ways that they're going into breakouts and whatever, lots of different ways that they're connecting in a way that they haven't before. And just, John, to the point with the 5,000 people in person, all the best with that. But think about those people that are sitting in the last couple of rows. That are what sort of experience are they getting? And is it really better for them than what they could have with connecting with content and people in a virtual way like we're doing now? Because inevitably it's about just kind of pushing this content out, and we need to say all this stuff and we want everyone so we can see them. It's really interesting, challenging idea, because the other thing that you raised as well is the idea of people dedicating time. And so they're stepping away from life, from work and home, and they're going to a place and they're dedicating their whole time to it. What we're seeing, particularly with some of the larger events, is that people are doing the same thing. Some people are even going to a hotel, or they're finding a dedicated space. But particularly with longer events that are happening, people are disconnecting from their email, and they're setting up a whole nother space in their home, and they're going, okay, I'm doing this event, and they're getting babysitters and they're doing whatever they need to do to dedicate their time to it. And I think that's really working well. But it's an interesting challenge.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that there's, when we think about these events, I do think that you want to think over time. Right now, events think of themselves as a 3-day event or a 5-day event. And they just aren't very effective at anything longer term than that. Because the event organizer is generally, I'm done. Now I think about the next event, and the company is like, I'm done. Let's think about next year. And they're not thinking about their relationships that they built with the attendees, ongoingly. I think that there are these 3 things that are really, really important when it comes to this. And I think the after hours is a key piece of what that looks like. And that is that you want to have an event that is kind of a tentpole. This is what's creating a focused energy at a specific time. But then you have all this discussion that can be going, to here and to the next event. And then it goes up like this. And in this time, for weeks and months, you can be building relationships. The other thing for this event to work is to give us the content early. So the content is being delivered to us early so we can have those discussions. So we're having lots of those discussions. That makes this live event a lot more valuable, because now if you have most of your live event be about Q&A and discussion, people already have the information. Conferences have for years thought that what was important was the content. People are only paying for the content. The content is the excuse to show up, and so what you really need is, if you go to like really high end, like when we stream government things, they get this, they post it for years. They'll post all the papers for a high level multi-government conference. And then the plenary is generally a big discussion. There's a couple opening statements, and then these are diplomats that are in the audience, and they're asking questions, and they expect to speak. They expect to be able to be part of that conversation. So they've been doing, that's part of where I learned this was, a decade ago, of doing all these big multi-country things, oftentimes in Africa, where they're sending out all these papers ahead of time. They're not trying to present content during that time. That they expect you to do your homework and read it before you get there for the conversation. So when you do that, when you send that stuff out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of time, let people, pull it in, the ones that they're interested in, and then let them discuss it. But that live piece is still important online. And I think that the after hours structure lets us, I have all these people that I consider friends now that are online that I've never met in person. And I have more friends now than I've ever had in my entire life. And what's amazing, ever, I'm not known for being very friendly in person. I know that you guys have a hard time visualizing that, but I'm not the most warm, fuzzy person in person. Mostly because I'm just kind of overwhelmed in some cases with people around me. And so the thing is, I have all these friends, 90%, 95% of them I've never actually met in person. And it's been totally effective, more effective than any conference ever. So,
Chris?
Yeah, I think the idea of, and I'll tell you, a couple of months ago, I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago, maybe, we, the team that's helping John broadcast his rocket launch, we felt like we were monopolizing the after hours conversation. Like it was a great way to make plans about something. So we set up a room. We have the countdown T-minus 11 days, and Jack is over there now. And it's been open 24/7 for the last month or something like that. And all the planning for the show has happened in there. And it's just a great way that people can pop in and go, hey, we need to talk about how we're going to do this transition. Is everybody, and it's a little bit of a time suck because we spend a lot of time there, but we get a lot done too. And it's absolutely, anybody who's having a hard time managing people remotely should totally consider, this is our office space. Let's go to work.
Alex.
I had to reroute a bunch of audio stuff yesterday, and Mickey and I just jumped into after hours and just kind of worked it out together. And we were discussing it and kind of pushing through it and everything else. And I do it specifically in that space because I want everyone to learn a little bit or figure out something, because again, I'm investing in that community. And I think that when we think of events, we want to think of events as a way to bring people into a community that we're going to engage with every day or every week, not something that we're going to do once a year. That's the fallacy of the whole thing, is that people keep on thinking they're going to engage with them once a year. We don't have to do that anymore because we are no longer constrained by time and space.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. Noah said, could the panel emphasize when live is necessary? Whoops. I've got something else in here, so I must have had that wrong.
Hold on. No, somebody, what happened there?
Yeah. Should I do the Roscoe Jones one?
Go ahead. Yeah, someone knocked
let me
one off.
dive into Roscoe's. Yeah. Roscoe Jones of Brea, California says, how would you structure an event to work as an audio podcast? This assumes many in the target audience want to be out and on the move listening and not sitting and watching.
John?
I would say if there is an audience, make sure they can't see what the presenter is looking at. So you want to create an atmosphere that the presenter has to describe anything that they're seeing. You're going to want to make them focused on making sure that this is just an audio only. This is where this is being done, and try to isolate the people if you can away from anybody else that are just having a conversation.
Alex?
Yeah, the main thing is I think that, and we've talked about this before, is have a structured part at the very beginning. We did that here. You have a structured part that is the core of the content. So that kind of sets the context for what's going on. And then you can open it up to Q&A. If you open it up to Q&A, we learned this by experimentation on our end. If you open it up to Q&A early, the conversation goes all over the place. And it's hard for someone just listening passively to necessarily hold the thread, and so if you start out with an open conversation, anywhere from 10 or 15 or 20 minutes long, you kind of set the pace and you get the ideas out that are going to be out there, and then you're going to turn it in. But again, as John talked about too, be careful of visuals and so on and so forth. We use them here, and we're prepping this for a podcast, but you want to be conscious of that. Some people can't see it.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, the visual is very important. Not to explain, because I was going to say the exact same thing. Mm-hmm.
And just to reinforce, like, platforms, yes, Clubhouse, but Twitter Spaces has done a phenomenal job with their people who are coming on each week. And just like we have here with how they start the show, having your guests prepped in advance, making sure just from the technical aspect, are they in a quiet place or whatnot. So all the same rules still apply for an actual event. It just goes, yes, back to the virtual, but taking a page out of like Twitter Spaces, they're doing a phenomenal job, in my opinion. Next question.
Next one comes from Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. He says, could the panel emphasize when live is necessary and when pre-recorded video is best?
Alex?
I would never stream pre-recorded unless someone forces me to. So like, I'll always recommend against streaming a pre-recorded play out. I find it to be inauthentic and not necessary. You're forcing everybody. You have a pre-record, and you're forcing everybody to watch it at 1x. So unless you have something that is highly produced, and I mean Apple level, like Apple's going to do a keynote tomorrow, and a lot of us are going to sit around and watch it. We're going to watch that because Apple probably spent, $250,000 a minute on it. Like it's highly produced, it's entertaining, but if you're not going to spend $100,000 to $200,000 a minute on your presentation, just let us watch it fast. Let us get the information in. Don't force us to watch it at 1x. I mean, nobody, even my daughter, she looked up at something. I was trying to figure something out. I opened up on YouTube and she's like, oh my gosh, can you speed that up? The future is people that are used to watching YouTube at 2x and 1.75x. You don't inflict that unless you're going to pack it. Again, it works for Apple because they pack it with quality and they pack it with production value, and almost nobody else in the world can afford to do that. So if you're doing especially slides, never pre-record slide decks and send them out. You want people to play those really fast because they're boring.
Sorry. Grant?
Yeah, this is an example where I can guess what Alex was going to say, and the problem is that he's like 5 steps ahead of everyone else. It's like I totally agree. And if I could move some of the medical institutions that I'm working with quickly to that, then I would. But it's a big ship to turn around, and so where we're at is, I'm about to record exactly what you're talking about. I'm about to record 120 slide deck presentations that are going to be played out, live, as in live streamed, played out. Yeah, but the tiny shift of the rudder at the back of the ship is that we got them to do a couple of on-demand sessions. So the content's made available well before, and then they're using the whole live session as a panel discussion. And we're like, and we did it last year, and it worked really well. And so we're slowly moving more and more to that. But the interesting thing is, as we plan out this, it's a 4-day, 4 concurrent room, like fully virtual event. And it's like, why are we doing concurrent, sessions? Anyway, we are. And they're big plenary sessions. They don't do any Q&A in the plenary sessions. They do Q&A in all of the concurrent sessions, but none in the plenary sessions. And so obviously the question for me is, well, then why would we do that live? Like, I mean, the platform that we have to use for it, we can do the simulated live, where it's basically just playing out a Vimeo file, but it just syncs everyone as they drop in, so they're all viewing it at the same time, which means that you get perfect streaming, because it's not actually live streaming, it's just buffering. And as we have this conversation about, well, why wouldn't we just pre-record it? I really push back at them saying, unless you're going to engage the audience, even if you're not going to be asking questions, but you're at least saying, hey, it's great to see Chris from California, really good to see you here. And you were really engaging yesterday. It was great to hear some of your conversation or whatever, right? As simple as that, just something that pulls people into the audience and gives a reason for it to be live. Otherwise, it just shouldn't be. But yes, I'm catching up on the steps. I might be 4 steps closer to Alex, but in this stuff. The good thing is I do this stuff in Australia, and then I do stuff with Blue and in America, and that's where I get my fix of being more at the closer to where Alex is.
Bill.
The only time producers have said to me that I have to do pre-recorded, that I can't push back in, is when it's something involving legal or regulatory, that they've spent too much getting teams of lawyers to approve exactly that language, and we'd have to roll in a video that introduces that topic to a new group of salesmen or whatever, and it has to be done exactly that way, and then you hope to get out of that and discuss it and open it up for the other thing. So occasionally I'll get those kind of situations, but that's about all.
Jeffrey?
I like doing the pre-records. It's in my situation, a lot of times I have to deal with a lot of people that'll just sit down in front of their camera and do their presentation. We won't have time to figure out positioning too much, if they've got the lighting, what type of microphone they have, and all that other stuff. So it gives me an opportunity to kind of fix the problems that they might have started out with. And in all reality, if they're paying me for a live or pre-recorded, it really doesn't matter. I'll do the pre-recorded. We even did something last year with one event where we had a small Discord where they watched the videos at the same time, and those people were there in the video room watching their video. They were able to respond to questions and say, yeah, I messed up there, or anything like that. So they had that interaction going through without them having to be on camera and talking on a script.
Alex?
I just want to qualify. I don't mean that you should never use pre-record. I think pre-record is great. Presentation of all material that needs to be precise should be pre-recorded and then delivered ahead of time. What I'm saying is that what you don't want people to do is walk through their presentation pre-recorded in the way that they would do it live and then present it as live. If you want to do something, give people the content ahead of time. The quality of the conversation goes up, exponentially. When somebody gets the videos, you create little 5 or 10 minute videos about your new product or your ideas or whatever that are very dense. They can watch them over again if they need to. They can discuss things amongst themselves, and then they get to talk to that expert in a week. That is that's the goal. That's what we're going to do more and more here. That's the best way to do it. The real issue is that when people, because you want to be interactive, that's what keeps people awake. That's what keeps people watching. So get that over with and then dedicate your time to a real discussion about the product and the process. And that's going to keep people watching. Your average view time will be 10x, not 5x, not 2x, but 10x. If people are able to interact live with the folks that did that presentation.
Matteo?
Yes, I just have a use case when people that need to deliver the presentation have an unstable internet connection, which often happens, unfortunately, with people I deal with. I ask them to pre-record a presentation that I can use as a backup should something go wrong. So that's a use case that is still good for me.
Absolutely.
Noah?
I really asked this question just to confirm my bias, but live is for interactivity, and then video is for compacting information.
Yeah,
that's a good way to put that. Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis is back with what's the new type or genre or niche of virtual event you've recently attended?
Noah?
Attending wise, I actually watched a little bit of a Tony Robbins conference just to check that out and see what it's like to see what he's doing with that interactivity. A couple future events, we've talked about this a few times, but OH Space is launching some rockets in the desert in a couple weeks. I'm going to go with that and have some interactivity there. And then I'm also hoping or planning to do something around the Tesla Giga opening that's happening. I think it's April 7th right now.
Alex?
I don't know how new it is, but the event that I've really been excited about is one where you get a bunch of panelists together and they all talk in the morning and they answer people's questions. I have to admit that after getting used to this, I don't watch many for more than about 5 minutes. Like, almost everybody's events, I turn on, I take notes of what I mostly don't like, and then I turn it off. Because it's just, that's the problem with virtual events right now, is that so many of them are so bland. But I don't think it has to be that way. And so that's the hard part, is when I attend them, they aren't making the mark yet for most of the time.
Nigel?
I think it's important to note that I understand enough about American football to write it on the back of a matchbox in a large felt tip marker pen. So I just don't get it. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. My wife, who's American, loves Super Bowl. We watch the Super Bowl every year. I just hope for adverts. This year was a different experience for me. So that, as a virtual event, listening to the conversation on after hours while watching it, it changed Super Bowl for me this year, no question.
And just for those who might not have been there, we had after hours playing it out and having the conversation, just to what Nigel was speaking about. Next question.
Next one comes from Tobias Moss again in Minneapolis. He says, clearly with sustained office hours-esque virtual events, you can create professional and personal relationships. What are the best practices to enable relationship forming among participants at even a one-off event?
Alex?
I will argue that you should be always thinking about the event is the beginning of a relationship between all of the attendees that you're going to nurture every day, every week, every month, whatever, you're going to be building that up. And that's the future, because we're no longer constrained again by time and space. The reason we did one-offs before was because we had to rent a hotel and people had to fly in and they had to do all these things, and to get everybody there was a big lift. And so we did it all at one time. We're not constrained. I mean, we do this show here for almost nothing, and we're in after hours for almost nothing, and so if someone gave me the budget for one booth at CES, one major booth at CES, I could run office hours for a decade, and so the thing is that is the, we need to think about how do we build those long-term relationships. Now, as far as doing some of those things, the breakout rooms, I think, work pretty well. I think Grant will probably talk more about that.
Jason?
I love this question because it is very much what we do in office hours. I would say find or create a platform whereby you really can shine and show off what you know. And then from there, lean into any sort of engagement that you get. For example, last hour, Brant had a question about a de-embedder. I immediately said, hit me up on Discord. It was I answered it in one sentence. And, since then, in the last, 30 minutes, I've given him what he needs in order to do that pretty precisely. And I'm sure he's away doing it right now. Lean into the engagement that you get.
Grant.
Yeah, one of the things I think after the event is really key, but even before the event, one of the things 2 years ago that Blue did on their first event was a thing called Tech Check. And that was really just bringing people into a Zoom meeting and just making sure that it's working for them and then kind of sending them on their way. Now, fast forward 2 years, we're still doing that on events, even with tens of thousands of people. And it's less about the tech now, and it's more about the human connection they're getting with event staff. That's one thing. But we also encourage the conversation that happens between the people that join at the same time. There might only be 4 or 5 people that join that meeting. The event hasn't even started yet. And already they've made a connection. And we've had people that have connected on, LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatever, and they've gone through the whole event journey together, having met in the tech check room at the start. And then similarly, during the event, when we break into rooms, we have them, because we do all of our large meetings in Zoom with up to 1,000 people. Often we're actually more about 300 or 400, because we want our breakout rooms to be about 5 or 6 people. So all of our rooms are limited. But what happens is people start to know what room they're in, so the 300 or so people they're in, and they make Facebook groups and Telegram groups, and suddenly now they're called the room 17 at X event, and that connection continues on as well. So making those pre, during, and post-event opportunities is really key.
Matteo?
Yeah, that is absolutely fantastic, Grant. And what we do is something that we call open spaces and barcamp, which are real-life, very unstructured conferences where people have to talk among themselves. They create a common agenda, and there is a very high quality of exchange. After hours and office hours are absolutely exemplary of that as well. And if you can get people to talk among each other, and then create also ways for them to link in the future, that really works well. And open spaces really work well, and we do them in every conference, whether it's virtual or whether it's physical. And people really is the moment they enjoy most, because they can build relationships instead of just listening.
Great point. Next question.
Next one comes from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis. He says, after an event, would you ever leave open unsupervised breakout rooms?
So this is going to be said in my Jason voice, like, no, but then also it depends. Just looking at what the size of the community. And the reason I say no is just looking at if the legalities of if anything happens during the event. And if it is community, whether it's a professional organization or whoever is hosting, always having someone to be there just if anything happens. That's the reason I say no. The it depends part is on size. How many people are attending this virtual event where, yes, you could leave it open. So that was my initial for all the legalities that might come behind it. Grant?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of this, and so much so that we find a way around or to support those legal issues. And my parallel with it is I call it the parking lot talk, right? So your event has just finished, and an in-person event, and inevitably people start walking out, and they hang around for hours and hours and hours talking in the parking lot. I think something that we can all do on our virtual meetings is never close a meeting when there's people still there. This is such a simple thing to do, but how does it feel when you finish a meeting and then it's host has ended the meeting? Like everyone just gets kicked out. It's the difference between you leaving a meeting or being pushed out. And it works just with small meetings. So I'll just turn my video off, right? And then people all leave, and then I close it. And the same goes for these events that I run, is that when there's opportunity, I just let it run, and I roster different people. We have a series of breakout rooms, and then we have a few people that will jump in and out of those breakout rooms and just check on what's going on and making sure it's all okay. And they can go for 2 or 3 hours, and people leave when they want to leave rather than pushed out, like they've had this amazing event and then it's a black screen, like they just jolted straight back into real life. rather than actually having a nice, debrief with some people, and they get to connect with them and then they leave on their own accord. It's a so much better way of ending an event.
Some etiquette there, some virtual etiquette. Jeffrey?
Two things one reason I can think of not having anybody in a breakout room is if they are trying to get unbiased information from there. So in that case, somebody would be in at the beginning of the breakout room and saying, okay, nobody from this group is going to be around. This is unmonitored. You're going to have to work it on your own. And then, of course, after about an hour, we'll have you come back to the main room and discuss your findings from there. Other than that, if somebody's really set on having a breakout room that I can't attend or I can't be a moderator for, I first of all make sure I get it in writing that says, okay, the responsibility is not going to fall on me. So if things go south inside that room, it won't come back to me and we won't have issues there. But you can also get volunteers. And with any type of event, a volunteer is set of volunteers are pretty easy to get, especially people that are very passionate about it. And you might know those people, so you have a little bit of confidence in how they work. I used to do this all the time when I did events with the theater, and we'd have a group of volunteers that would come and take care of the doors and take care of their own things. And you just have to walk in and say, how you doing? Just like Grant said, just kind of turn off the camera and say, hey, everything going okay? Okay, perfect. I'm gonna move on and go from there.
Bill?
I've experienced this just recently. I think it was one of the FMC things that was scheduled to go for 3 days, and the conference went for 3 days, and it was fine. And then afterwards, I had chatted to a few people in their little coffee room or whatever it was. I got a ping like 3 days later, we're still going. I think that thing went for like 5 days. Self-run by people, and I say self-run in terms of the fact that you usually know most of the people if you're kind of hooked into a community, and you can pass off the host duty to somebody that's a trusted ally rather than just leave it for anybody to wander in. But I was astonished, and after I thought about it for a second, no, because that's exactly what Grant was describing. We all love hanging with our peeps at these conferences, and given the social opportunity, they're going to take it and run with it.
Next question.
Next question comes from Noah Sargent here in Fullerton in the U.S. Alex has mentioned he's seen certain clients with a 20x reach through online events. Have others seen a similar multipliers, and have you seen any presentable data or statistics to show that off?
Alex?
So I'm not going to talk any more about the multipliers except for the fact that 7.9 billion people multiplied times 0001 is 790,000. So unless you have an event with more than 790,000 people, you are knocking out 99.999% of your market, your addressable market. Like, you just have to like you do the math. Now you can cut it out and say, well, I'm really not interested in X, Y, Z, but that math works almost all the time. And you can cut some of that down by saying, I'm not interested in China or India or Africa. It's still going to be a big number of an addressable market that you're not reaching, for that thing. And that's the problem with physical events, is that they exclude just massive amounts of a more and more online community all over the world that might be interested in your product. And it's just, that's what makes it great.
Grant?
So 2 years ago, almost to the day, is when we had Blue Melnick came on Office Hours. We got him on because we heard that he was doing an event with 1,000 people in Zoom. And we were like, what? We're all like, whoa, 1,000, whoa, yeah, 1,000 people, what? And what he spoke about was that it was an event with 400 registered in-person registrations, attendees. And within 2 weeks, it had to convert to a fully virtual event, and it went to 1,200 registrations online. Now, those sorts of numbers have been consistent and more. It's been at least 3 to 4 times where those numbers have dramatically increased. But the thing is, and Blue can talk more eloquently about this, but particularly because they're Sage Events, his event company with Barry, with those specific clients that have not only increased their numbers of attendees, but also the conversions that they have and the ongoing relationships have all been multipliers. There hasn't been anything about what they do that has decreased by moving to virtual, and that's, I don't know, like 50, 60 events now or something in those 2 years. And that's, I'm honest in that there's not one of those that has gone the opposite way, and it just continues to go that way.
Alex?
And the one thing I just want to put a pin in is the fact that people like Grant and Blue are running those events. What makes it go down is people having bad experiences in virtual events. When the events are managed like real events with real budgets and real staff, what we're seeing is that's when we see those multipliers popping up. When they're treated as back of the room or the best we could do with one or two people, then people don't want to come back.
Next question.
Fleety in Bali, Indonesia is up next with how do we approach pricing virtual events for smaller clients with more niche verticals? Somehow it has to make sense financially for all parties.
John? You're muted.
Can't hear you.
We can't. You're muted.
Sorry. How do we approach virtual events for smaller clients? So what I would suggest is do it as simple as their budget allows you to do it. And just make sure that you're putting as much effort into the content that you're delivering more than into the quality of the experience. Obviously taking the audio and video into account, but a simple webcam and a good USB mic is going to go a long way to produce a pretty decent content. Zoom is a great platform. It's pretty affordable to get into for any event that's under 1,000 people. And if you're getting an event larger than that, then I would hope budget kind of allows you to step that up as you grow it.
Jeffrey?
I don't do that much larger events than what's beyond what I can do. So any type of breaks will come from the fact that I don't have to book a plane ticket and get a hotel room, do travel expense. So with that aside, that lowers the cost. But my general price is going to be exactly the same, because the reality is I'm going to end up doing more work trying to get these people set up and their video set up and their audio sounding good before they even get on. So it just doesn't make sense to change any of the price. And if I have to bring on a second person, the price is going to go up.
Alex?
The main thing is not what the price is, but not getting yourself overextended beyond what you can do well. Like we, for a long time, we did Office Hours 1.0 was something I could just turn on. And I very purposefully did not add a lot of things that could be added to the show because I needed it to be self-sustaining. And so now we have people who are up for, figuring a lot of this stuff out. And so we can grow to a bigger capacity. But the key is that when you're pricing things out is where people get themselves in trouble is saying they can do way more than what the budget will allow them to do well. And so you can scale it down to, and this is in all of production, kind of all of the world, but is people trying now there are places where we might try to do that in very specific areas, and you might be able to find an efficient way to do something, but you have to be very careful to say, okay, if you've got $1,000, this is what we can do with that $1,000, and we can make it great for your audience, within the box that we have. You can't, that's the caviar, the amount you're looking for a caviar event with a, tuna fish budget is a different, you need to, if you have a tuna fish budget, then have tuna fish. Don't the caviar, and make that really good. And so I think that's the real challenge, is looking for what can you do well inside the budget that they give you. And by the way, cheapest thing to do is add interactivity. The cheapest way to get people to go, oh, that was a great event, is Q&A. Like you can just have people sitting around talking, and people will like it it's interacting with the audience is the cheapest way to add production value.
Next question.
Liberty White, Atlanta says, what have you found to be a sweet spot for virtual conferences? How many days and sessions per day?
Alex?
No overlapping sessions. That drives what you have. Do not overlap sessions. We are no longer constrained by time and space. It creates FOMO, and it creates frustration and anger for your folks, because especially if you add Q&A people are much more upset because they actually value the session. And so the thing is you have to be very careful. If you're going to do a bunch of playouts of pre-recorded stuff, knock yourself out. You can do 10 a day if you want, because they can always go back and watch them some other time. But if you're going to add Q&A and have a conversation, now it's valuable. And if it's valuable, do not let them overlap. You saw what Apple did. Apple did their thing in the fall was 3 months long or 2 months long or something like that. They had 5 or 6 sessions a day that were very different time zones. So they cover the same things with different teams in different parts of the world. And it was masterfully done. I mean, except for the WebEx part, but that was horrible. But the design of what Apple did with that was really, really well done.
Next, Grant, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. Consistently with all the events with Blue and Barry has been 3 days. 3 days is a really good. Now I know that the particular client that they have is kind of enrollment based events, right? So they're coaches and authors and, mentoring programs and things like that. And because of that, then doing a 3-day program works really well to have a couple of nights that you can do some social sort of events and things. And then it's all about how when you're doing the pitches and things like that, right? And so the 3 days works really well. And it also is a journey that people can go on that feels more than just a day. I get it all the time, people talking about virtual. Oh, we normally do this in a 2-day event, but we think we'll just do it in one, or we're just going to do half a day or something because we don't, people Zoom fatigue, people can't do it. And it's just not true. Like if you've got great content, you've got a heap of interaction, then people will do it, and they'll do it at any time of the day as well. We consistently have people from all over the globe on these events, and they're up all night, like people will just do it. And so you don't have to kind of bend yourself into a pretzel to try to accommodate people. When you're onto a good thing, you can say, this is what it is. And we're going for, long days. And it's worth it for people,
Yeah, just preparing them. Good points. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana says, I have a live event later this week that 2 presenters are now coming in over Zoom, but the audience is all in person. Are there any pitfalls for them remote controlling their slides from internet clickers or anything else that could be a gotcha?
Jason.
There are so many gotchas that I'm going to leave the internet clicker thing to somebody later down the panel. It's really important that you have a master of ceremony that is in front of the live audience and, paying attention to them and handling the audio. If you're going to have any Q&A, any sort of interaction whatsoever, you need somebody who's handing a microphone to somebody in the panel and somebody, chase camming it for the panelists. The other thing is, get some rollaway TVs, put Mac Minis in. The way it's done on Twit, for example, is a perfect example of this, I think. And that will solve a lot of problems right off the bat.
Grant?
Yeah, we even with short presentations, which is the preferred, a 7-minute presentation, something like that, we pre-record it and we'll play it out, and then we'll have the person there live, coming on live. And it just means that the presentation runs super smooth. There's never any breakout, dropouts or anything like that. The other thing I'd say though, if you are doing it live, is the slide control in Zoom now is really cool. So it can control Keynote and PowerPoint, and it controls it in the background, which is really cool. So you can actually share back to the person the view, the presenter view, or the program feed. And then they just have either keyboard strokes left and right, or even just buttons in Zoom, and they can advance it all themselves, and you don't have to use anything else. It works very well.
Noah?
I would just go back to the fundamentals of live streaming, right? And so hardline internet at the presenters' houses, at the place of the in-person, people, right? Your audience, everybody should be on hardline internet. Have a tech check before in that room, right? so that you can set up a stream, have it, even if it's like an office room 6 doors down or something, right? So that you can test that connection, make sure everything's working flawlessly, have a tech check with the speakers the day before, and even give them a 30-minute pre-call, right? So whatever time their event starts, give them 30 minutes ahead of time, and then make sure you go over the basics, sliding, camera, audio, internet, all those things, so that you have a successful stream.
Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada says, what do you think about the most successful conferences you have attended? What was the value proposition and how would you replicate that virtually?
Alex?
Generally, when I go to these conferences, the only place I spend is the expo hall. Like, I don't actually go to any of the sessions at all. And I wander around the expo hall and I want to learn things about products that I haven't seen before, that I haven't, that I'm looking at, or oftentimes I'm there looking for something. I'm there to search for a specific kind of product, a solution that I have. The main thing that I think you could do to reproduce that virtually is that vendors need to have real studios, because they can't show their product. What they keep on doing is trying to show their product with their webcam. And these are vendors that don't, who spend, $2 million on a booth that's only going to be there for a week, but will not spend $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 for a permanent studio where they can be doing things all the time and showing people how things work, with little, multiple cameras and close-ups. I can talk to Ross about their router, for instance. I don't really need to have it in front of me. Like I know what it looks like. If someone's standing there in front of it and pointing to it and having close-ups of it, that's fine. Like I don't need to touch the router, to make that work. There might be some things that I need to look at, but very few. For the most part, what's missing are vendors having the technical capacity to talk interactively with their audience about their product.
Jason?
And if anyone's looking for just what I think is a good framework for this, a good model, Behringer has done a really good job at this. Every single time they have a new firmware update, for example, for the X32, they have a live webinar where they will go over their slides and then they will, explain it one by one. Same thing with a YouTube channel. They clearly have invested in their own ability to do live and, near-line production, and it is insanely clear.
Well, there is another great session. Thank you to our producers for all of your fantastic questions. I see the chat was on fire, so you enjoyed it. To the panelists, thank you so much for your time and responding to the questions. And come back tomorrow. But before that, we're going to hop into after hours. So we'll see you shortly.
Then we have to wait. We have to wait for the graphic. There it is. That's going to go black.